Okay, hey, we're back. It's episode 9. Today, inventory calculations, a festival of computer use. When about the early 1960s, when people got their hands on those huge mainframes and they just started calculating all sorts of things that were too hard to do with a slide rule. And the audience says, "What's a slide rule?" I said, "You're going to have to ask maybe your grandfather or grandmother or something like that." I have one. They used to have a slide rule golf tournament too, which unfortunately went away, or fortunately for me, in any event. Okay, so what's going on campus? Next week is E-Week. There will be festivities of some unknown as yet sort. I know the Dean's Advisory Council's meeting here, so there'll be a bunch of people floating around making demands, I guess. And there'll be some activities. If you're looking for something to do on Saturday, March 4th, you have your choice of science fair, which I discovered after I did my slides. You can check that out with Elizabeth, or Tracy drew a masterwork of scheduling. They also have VEX robotics competition that day. And of course, the obvious question is, who does these schedules? And the answer is not the people here. It's like some sort of national scale schedule, because certainly no one would schedule two big activities on the same day, forcing the youth to choose between science fair and robotics or baseball, which we all know which would win, right? Hanging out, doing nothing. Okay, same event, if you're looking for something to do, even if you're not normally on campus, you can. Certainly no parking fines on Saturday. You don't need a sticker. Okay, so that's what's happening here. We had our friendly bake sale yesterday, and it seemed like there was plenty of calories in the air. You know, I tried one of the guys made an almond cake, which I tried out. It was pretty good, except it was definitely not a low-carb, no-sugar festivity. So, oh well, more hours on the rowing machine, right? Okay, so in any event, today, we were talking about inventory models. Be a good idea to do some numbers. And let's take a look at our story from last time first, because sometimes the numbers overshadow the importance of the thing. Because being students, everybody's worried about getting the problems right, instead of figuring out what's actually going on. And so let's do that. Okay, so as I like to say, the scenario is you get something and you turn it into something that you sell, a product. Okay, what, T-shirt, French fries from McDonald's, doesn't matter. If you ran a McDonald's, you have the same problem as the people who make T-shirts, that kind of thing, roughly. You have other problems, but as far as inventory control goes. idea. You need stuff to make the product. And the goal is how to do it best. And we have two competing objectives. So for you Dr. Sohn fans out there, he would tell you that you have a choice essentially, when you think about how to do best, in the world of Dr. Sohn and Kammerdiner and Mullen and all those optimizers, you look at one objective, or you could have multi-objective optimization, but then you have a trade-off, right? And the trade-off is cost and customer service. And one easy way to explain that is to imagine determining you need something like new gym socks. Nice, innocent product, right? You could buy one pair and wash it after every wearing. You could, of course, choose an alternative to that, which will make you eventually unpopular with the people in the gym, right? You could wear them again. But more seriously, you could buy one pair, you could buy 6 pairs, right? If you buy 6 pairs and wash them on the weekend, you got through the week, right? And life is good. Problem is 6 pairs cost more than 1 pair, right? So, in a sense, you spend more to have better customer service, right? Nice, easy way of thinking about it. Now, if you're, say, our friends at Raytheon, they can buy more parts, thereby spending more to improve customer service. But when they buy more parts, they need more space. They have greater risk of obsolescence and all sorts of other things that can happen. So that's the scene. All right? So no matter how fancy the equation someone has in a textbook, it's all about, should I buy more stuff or not? The rest of it is the details. And the unfortunate aspect of doing the fancier algorithm is it requires better data. And so, as I used to joke with people when I was an IE grad student, I said, where are you getting that cost data? And they'd say, oh, well, that'll be given. I said, good luck with that. Let me know how that works, kind of. So, any event, away we go. Now we all got the picture, right? More socks take up more space, and so on. So as I mentioned last time, we have ordering policies. What to order, how much to order. So our friends at, for example, any place you want to pick. Vias Global Industries, my favorite company. Doesn't really exist, but it's existed in many problems, including one today. How much stuff do I order? When do I order it? Now, university labs, such as Vias Global, Aggie Innovation Space, places like that, are usually bad examples of inventory control. Why? No one pays attention till they're out of things, right? Then there's a big panic. You pay extra for shipping. You know where this goes, right? Okay, independent demand. Again, these are things we can forecast. How many Buick Encores will I build? And then, as you'll see during the semester, anyone who might consider the Encore some kind of SUV-looking vehicle, you can forecast how many to build, and now you got to deal with model options, which will be later in the semester. You know, how many do you make in blue or ruby red or white? Also a problem, right? Somebody wants a ruby red one and you don't have one, they might not buy a white one or a silver one or whatever. Some of the business issues that come along, the cost of the parts, how much money do you owe? How much storage space do you have? Shelf life? Many others. What you use the space for is important. If you think about space, even on campus, we get into these space allocation things. They're just unbelievable. Every so often, somebody gets the newspapers and the legislature going because they came by campus and they saw a lot of empty buildings. And they're thinking, geez, there should be classes on Sunday. I wanted to take a class and I could only take it on Sunday and you didn't have it. And that, of course, is a political issue of unbelievable, you know, it sizzles for a while and then it goes away. But essentially we have an inventory of classrooms, right? And as I mentioned, when Jet Hall went out of commission to be rebuilt, we lost a lot of classrooms, which created the opportunity for endless circus of multiple classes being assigned to a classroom. I can't find a room. And of course, students and faculty being students and faculty, the ranting and raving was endless and unbelievable. I said, wait a minute, you teach that class. You should know what happened, right? But I need to teach today, and I can't get in. I said, it happened to me too. I got down here, down the hallway with Dr. Park on the first Wednesday, and we discovered there was a CE class in the class I was supposed to go into, right? The senior design with Dr. Park. And Dr. Park, being a less, not amenable to just walking in on someone, I said, no problem, I'll do it. So we go in there and I get, you know, my head handed to me and I say, excellent, we're scheduled to be in here. I'm glad you're annoyed. Thanks for sharing that, right? Having worked in a factory before I became an educator, you know, faculty are relatively benign compared to people in plants, so, you know, nobody's going to chase me down the hall with their nail gun, right? So in any event, even classrooms could be looked at in terms of inventory of classrooms, what's available. How many people do you have available? Is something we'll talk about shortly as well. And we mentioned some order policies, and there's piece for piece, which is the one that you would use for many things. You could buy periods of supply. I use 1 container of orange juice a week. You run the risk of stock out, right? But, you know, say, okay, not a problem. Fixed order quantities. The way you would recognize fixed order quantities, nice simple consumer example, is a 6-pack. You can't buy one 12-ounce can of something in the store. You pay a premium, right? You can buy a 6-pack or a 12-pack or a case. You can't buy a 13-pack, can you? Or light bulbs now. Like, what is it? Those little 4-watt light bulbs that go into like Fiesta lighting on, you buy them 4 in a pack. They're cheap enough that, I'm not actually saying, geez, that was a $4 pack of light bulbs and $3 is just sitting there waiting for another light bulb to blow. That kind of thinking will do what to you? Not good things. You can over-apply it. On the other hand, if I had to buy a truckload of light bulbs to get a light bulb, that would be a little unbelievable, right? So what this would suggest, by the way, is there's a certain amount of marketing that goes on into fixed order consumer order, right? Kind of like my example of gym socks. If you go over to, I don't know, Kohl's or Target to buy gym socks, you can buy them in 6-packs, you can buy them in 2-packs, like Nike and Adidas socks. You just can't get 2 neon green ones in the same pack. You always get a black one or something. It's a marketing problem, not for this class. Min and max orders have to do with your ability to make things in a certain size. Like the machine will make 12 at a time or something like that. A lot of times there's a minimum order quantity on commercial things because it's too expensive to place an order. A story I tell people, which really happened when I first got out of college, I was working for a defense contractor and we were quoting spare parts, and there was some connector that we needed from someone. So I called up the company to find out how much for the connector, and the guy said, "We're not going to make just one." I said, "Well, I got to put a price down. Tell me." He said, "I don't know, $10,000. I said, "Would you put that in writing?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Excellent. Fantastic." Didn't want to do it, right? I mean, it was, say, a $10 piece of hardware, but in order to do it, you had to nail down everything and then reset up to make this one thing. Costs a lot of money. Economic order quantity is the one we talked about. Think about it. When you buy, for example, even a consumer product like potato chips, you can only buy them in certain sizes, right? If you have a hungry group coming over, you need to bring more. And you could put them back in the bag after everybody's been eating them out of the bowl, but that might be a little like a shelf life problem. Okay, so when we do our inventory, we're in, we run out. At some point, we reorder based on the lead time required to get the new order. An example of the lead time problem, really simple. You might have an inkjet printer at home. It has a cartridge in it. Cartridge goes out. Do you go to your closet and take out one of 10 you have waiting? No. What do? You go down to Office Max or Staples and buy one, right? Could they be out? Sure. Then you go over the other one. That's lead time. How long does it take to replace the thing? If I have to order it from Vietnam, then I have some substantial lead time. There's the amount of time it takes to do the thing, and then there's roughly 14 days for it to travel across the Pacific in a container, and then some number of days till it gets to you. That would be lead time. Now, if the vendor isn't going to start working on your thing until the 12th of never, then your lead time is longer. And you have to plan accordingly. So when we thought about the EOQ, we had, depending on the textbook you use, lambda, different order quantities, you have fixed demand per unit time. That's the easiest way to start looking at it. Because what you should know from doing any kind of quantitative modeling is, first you model the thing with the most restrictive assumptions. We don't allow shortages, meaning we'll always have enough to do the job. Orders, what this means is that as soon as it appears, it's in stock, which is roughly correct in modern America and the rest of the world. You have fixed order quantity, you have some marginal costs, you have some holding costs. All, you say, and roughly, this is the easiest version. As we'll see, they can get, as the assumptions are relaxed, you have more terms. And that would produce a cycle. This didn't copy well, as usual, but roughly a sawtooth kind of thing over time. So we get the quantity, we use it up, bam. Got more, use it up, bam. And so forth. What the economic order quantity tries to do graphically again is find the place where the ordering cost and the holding costs intersect. Which would be the minimum. Now, I didn't make this graph. I realized that it looks like it might be a little to the left of the minimum, but yeah, it's a little iffy. I agree. But fundamentally, what are you doing? It cost me X to hold on to the thing. It cost me Y to place orders. What's the best quantity to order? Now, if the economic, for example, it's something you buy in 6-packs, if your economic order quantity is 5, how much good does that do you? Not a lot, which argues for a little common sense once you get an answer. If you get 13.5, well, problem is you're going to be ordering 14 or 15 or 20 or whatever you can get. What this is useful for is, number one, it gets people to look at the two costs. Because ideally, the best order quantity would be what? 1. It shows up, you do what you do, and then it goes and gets sold. Bam. The problem is most things don't happen that way, so we want to look at this. Now, the people in this class who are taking ie524 as undergrads, the holding cost has a lot to do with your facility design and also what the thing is. If you go into a business, for example, I don't know, high-end jewelry, the holding costs on that stuff is pretty high, right? If you're going to keep a bunch of diamonds and emeralds around in inventory, well, first you have to pay for them, correct? And where does that money come from? Adds to your holding costs. And then you have all the security that goes with that, and so forth. Right? Now, the shelf life on expensive jewelry is pretty much 0, right? It's not going anywhere. You don't have to worry about shelf life problem. It zeroes itself out. Diamonds are around forever and all that. Pretty much, anyway. But the holding costs are pretty high, right? You can't just have them in your pocket all day, can you? No. In general, no. Okay, so let's look at some numbers. So we have our friends Vias Global. They're using rolls of plastic, and these numbers are relatively benign. They're designed to be easy to deal with. $6.25 to place the order, $25 in holding costs. I don't know. It sits in a space you wanted to use for something. Okay? Now, if you're sitting out there thinking, why does it cost $6.25? Well, you have to order the thing, which means you have to do what? Do whatever it is to order it, right? Maybe they have some restrictive vendor policy. It takes longer to get the right vendor. Who knows? Just run with it. It's not free to buy things, is the key here. Now, the more exotic the thing, the more expensive it might be to buy it, right? If you want to buy, I don't know, a car, the cost of buying it can be lengthy or not lengthy. Depends on you, right? if you're the sort that wants to check out every model and go on test drives, and you want to spend, say, 3 or 4 weekends doing this, that's not free, right? You might think you're out having fun, but as I tell students all the time you spend doing things is not free. That's time you don't get back. So the same thing with ordering plastic. If you're not doing that, what are you doing? You could be doing something different, and essentially you incur an opportunity cost. Okay, so the simple calculation version goes like this. The order cost times the number of orders. The total cost is the order cost times 1250 over Q gives us the number of orders, right? If Q is the quantity we order. And for convenience, we just say Q over 2 times the $25 of the holding cost. So we place 5 orders a year for $250. Okay, so what, you say? Big deal. Well, it turns out that based on those numbers, the min cost happens. Notice the beautiful continuity of my curves. Why is that? Well, what I did was calculate the total cost for and the order cost and holding cost for a bunch of different quantities, but I didn't do it continuously. But roughly, it's right around $600, the min total cost. Notice one interesting thing. You should have noticed this by now. Say, what did we forget? What does it cost to roll? What does it cost to roll is not a part of this, does it? It's a constant unless there's a quantity break. So if, for example, if I order 1,000 rolls at a time, I get it a lot cheaper. It might be worth exploring that instead of economic order quantity. And I switch to a fixed order. Order 1,000, and then in November order 1,000 more, or October, whatever. Make sense? Usually things do get less expensive in larger quantities. The reason is people can deal with larger quantities by taking their fixed costs out over a bigger group of components. Whereas if you just order one at a time, they got all the setup, all the ordering, all the everything they have to do for that one. So if you order 10, they can divide that fixed cost over 10, 100, whatever. So often in industrial components, raw materials, you'll see a discount for larger quantities. It's not exactly because they love you, it's because they can get their money out differently. So if you think about something like that, suppose we have a part and it takes an hour Suppose we're making a part out of 1-inch diameter bar stock, round bar, right? If I want to make one, I got to buy a 12-foot bar and spend an hour setting up the machine, and then maybe however much time putting things back. Right? So to make one is expensive. On a 12-foot bar, I'm going to get 48 of these parts, roughly. Roughly. I know might not get 48, because how accurate the bar is open to question and so forth, right? But it makes sense to make as many as you can out of that one piece of material, right? So if somebody wants one, what would I do? I could say, okay, it takes an hour to set up, a minute to do. Let's say that costs $50 for the hour and $1 to do it, $51. And I charge you for the bar of steel. Let's say that's $10 for argument's sake. So one part is $61, plus all my other costs that go into it. So I have a little 3-inch bar steel part that just cost $100. Two of them can be $50 each. 50 of them could be $1 a piece, roughly $2 a piece. That's how the quantity thing works for you. So if you never thought about this, what it's really doing is taking the setup costs and any cost associated with acquiring material, right? And amortizing it over more parts. If you wanted to check the total cost per part, you could make a little spreadsheet and say, for example, if I ordered them one at a time, I'd spend $7,800 odd in order costs, right? $1,250 times 6 1/4. The holding costs confuse people, and that's just per period. Now, it's up to me. I probably wouldn't think of it exactly like this, but however many orders you make a year, you can do whatever. Okay, so any event, I could make 50 orders at 25. I could make 5 orders of 250. Probably what I do with the plastic thing is figure out some way to get it on essentially a periodic order point. Because what would be more useful with that is what? Just have it show up every so often, right? If you use the internet at all in your daily adventures, you've probably encountered an outfit called Harry's. Harry's is a vendor of razor blades and razors and things like that. Okay, now I'm basing that on my experiences on the internet because I find their ads on the oddest sites because it's cheap to do internet ads. Any event, Harry's has a deal where you can subscribe to get razor blades. And at first I thought I was seeing it all the time because I happened to buy their razor blades. And I figured it said a cookie somewhere. So I tried nailing all the cookies and then they were still there. And I said, this is more sophisticated than I thought. But any event, they have a deal where they figure out something. They ask you some things about how many times a week you shave, right? And then they recommend a order quantity. And one of the neat things of their ploy is that the more people who subscribe, the bigger orders they can place with their vendor, right? Actually, it's sort of interesting to watch it function because, you know, you teach this stuff, you sort of think, and how are they doing that? But it turns out Harry's got started by the guys who did Warby Parker, which is the place that does eyeglasses over the internet, which annoys local opticians no end because you got to go in to get your pupil distance measured. And one guy I talked to find out what he thought of it, when he finished sort of boiling over, he said, I charge people $50 to do the measurements or something, $25. But in any event, Warby Parker was another one that was based on use the internet to reduce costs. So, different class. A couple other problems from the textbook, 4.8 and 4.9. Good examples also. And they are on page thought I found it. No. Page 209. Units of demand and penalty costs. So here's the story. If somebody wants to buy something and you don't have it, you incur a penalty cost. Not in previous equation hood, right? Okay. Penalty cost is what? The cost of back ordering, the cost of people getting annoyed and leaving. Example, I mentioned the printer cartridge thing. Some of those stores actually have a deal where they give you a coupon if they don't have what you want. And that's to keep you from buying it someplace else and changing loyalty on the theory that a known customer is cheaper to keep than to get a new one, which is a different class altogether. But you should be aware of that anyway. So it gives you some receives and demands, and it says what's the ending inventory each month. You have 480 on January. So, for example, in January, if I have 480, get 200 orders for 520, I'm good, right? Is there any excess demand? Answer, no. Cheer, right? Need a crowd noise button, right? You could have something else. I was talking to David Chavez, who manages these rooms, and I was talking about my need for theme music, but now I need to add And then maybe for every time I get a problem wrong, we could have something like on Car Talk, they'll go, wah, 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 wah. Which for me would be frequent enough, wouldn't it? Yeah. Da, da, da. People could compete for the honor of hitting the button. All right, in February, we get an order of 1640. $480 plus 200 minus 520 gives us 160, right? Okay. Get an order for 1600. We receive 175. We're out of stock, aren't we? We are indeed. We have minus 1305. In March, I receive 750. The demand is 670. I'm a little less out of stock at minus 1225. And April, I'm at minus 700 because I have 950, demands 425, and we have minus 700. Eventually we and that one we have calculated is minus 480. And then in June, we receive a big shipment. The ship finally made it, right? And it's 550. And we go positive again at 1020. So what do you think of this as an inventory policy? So far, not so good, right? What's the penalty cost? Is every time you go negative, it costs you $10.
So 40.
Say again?
For $40 for this. For everyone negative?
Yeah, every time you go negative, it costs you $10.
Okay.
So that could be easily added up, right? In February, for example, we go minus 1305, $10 each, 13050, right? So if it only costs $10 at a time, we can add up the excess numbers. If you do first come, first served versus last come, first served versus whatever, ideally, what would you do? Order more. But if you couldn't, first come, first served is good where? In a retail setting, right? Whoever's in the store, right? When, I forget who it is, Nordstrom's or Neiman's has a tag on a sale, you snooze, you lose. In other words, they have like X number of them, and then first come in the store, right? That's what makes what work? The whole Black Friday, Thanksgiving shopping type model, right? First come, first served. You could do this a lot of different ways, and look at one of the things that this particular problem does is make the cost of a back order or stock out quite cheap, $10. That might be appropriate on an item that costs $10, $20, something like that. Why is that? Well, you have a lost sale when you do that, right? So the cost of being out of stock is $10 in revenue. That's one way to do it. Now, depending on the type business you're in, you could change that model quite dramatically. If your goal is to always have things in stock, you could make that cost quite high to your firm and manage accordingly. The cost of that is what? You have more stuff around. Therefore, you need more space, more money, incur shelf life, and all that sort of thing. It's a business decision. You can do all kinds of analytics on it, but fundamentally, eventually, you get to make a call, and you could be wrong. Or you could be right. Which, of course, everyone who's taken a class hates sentences like that, right? Because everybody just wants to know, how do I crank the numbers? And the answer is this. But the reality is, this $10 is a business decision. It could be 50, or it could be 50 cents, or it could be, I don't care. I sell till I'm out, and then I close. That could be like the barbecue model, right? We smoke X amount of stuff, and if you don't get online at 9 in the morning, come back tomorrow. Maybe you'll have better luck, right? They obviously are not as concerned about stock out as they are about the shelf life of their product and the time that goes into making the product, right? Because if those places wanted to serve more people, what would they do? Get more smokers, more, right? Automate everything, and it would lose its character, right? Then someone would complain, remember when they used to be good? No, but seriously, if you think about it, the people who run the kind of barbecue place that ends up on the Travel Channel, where they say get online at this time or you don't get any, they obviously are not worried about the cost of a stock out. They're worried about doing their product correctly in a controlled environment and having it be the best product for the people who add up to the amount they can process. That, again, is a business decision. Could I come up with a model for that? Sure. Is it going to help them see they should have more smokers and more people working? Maybe. Okay, so when you are interacting with your daily life, you can see examples of this all over. But even like the barbecue business is susceptible to how much product do you make and who will be disappointed if they don't get any. Now, if somebody opens up down the street and they have some grandpa's recipe also, which is slightly different from yours, maybe some of your customers will go there, right? Or maybe not. It all depends. Okay, 4.9. High-capacity disk drives for mainframes. Man, this is an old problem. You don't see a lot of mainframes these days. This is an idea of order policy again. And what they're suggesting here is the following. We use 720 of these things a year, whatever these disk drive housings are. In an old movie, you'll see what they're talking about. It's like the size of a dishwasher. You know, these little thumb drives you guys are using these days, they used to be the size of dishwashers and hold less stuff. Big magnetic, motor-driven disk drives is what this is talking about. That doesn't matter. It just gives the problem a little life. Very little, right? Because I had to explain to everyone why you would need a truckload for 40 disk drives, right? You're thinking you could stick that in a paper box, right? The kind of box that holds copy paper. You could put more than 40. All right. Any event, let's say they're engines or something then, if you like. Okay, so in any event, what it's asking you is, if these are your transportation costs, what should I do about that? And it says, what if we shipped 1 truck a week? 1 truck a week would be how many disk drives? $720 a year. Divide that by 52 weeks. That's the quantity you'd get each week. 720 over 52. It costs $300 to load up to 3 trucks, plus $160 per truck. $720 over $120 in this case. In this case, 6 sets of loading, 18 trucks. So 18 trucks means 18 sets of fuel, tolls, and so forth. Because they say in the problem, less than up to 3 truckloads cost $300 to load. In other words, what do you have to do? Get a crew in to load. It costs you $300 for the crew, say, and then it costs you $160 per driver. So if you have 3 trucks and 6 trips, that's 18 drivers and 6 loaders. All right, what's the best deal? This one. What's the worst deal for you? Probably this one. Why? I got to buy all 720 at once and pay for all 720. And put them somewhere. In this case, this is the most expensive transport, but if I can only use 14 a week, what does this do? Gives me a lot of flexibility, doesn't it? This one's kind of a moderate solution. Now, a lot of people would get edgy about not doing something like this if you really used a truckload at a time. But alternatively, what could you do? What would be a useful thing to do with this one? You might look at, how do I do this, which gives me exactly what I need each week, right? And do what? Minimize this cost in some way. For example, would the truck firm be willing to do a deal for a year? and reduce their costs because now they know they're going to make that one trip once a week. Entirely possible, right? Or you could look at alternative shipping methods. Now, what a lot of people do, and we talk about this in other classes, is try to get the vendor to be closer so it costs less to ship. So the vendors, say, over on the West Mesa of Las Cruces, transport costs are relatively minimal. It's mostly the loading costs. And if I could get the vendor to co-locate, that would be fantastic. And we'd be in a magazine. As an example of wonderful manufacturing planning, right? Also, if I do it this way, what happens with my shelf life problem? It goes down quite a bit, right? I could even change models, potentially. Whereas this way, I've got a pretty good sized load of disk drives to use up. Well, obviously this problem is too simple to be real, right? But the point is, what you should get out of something like this is the idea how much you order can be driven by cost, but then you have certain business decisions you accept as a result. So no matter how fancy my cost model, now I've got to deal with the reality of what I've just done, which is that with this one, every week I get a half-empty truck, sort of, little less than half load. If I'm the truck vendor, though, what could I do? Find out who else is in the area and bring them stuff, right? Or I could say, well, you know, maybe I could use a smaller truck, which would cost less if you could guarantee that you'd only do 14 at a time. Something more on the order of a U-Haul size truck, right? 20-foot truck or an 18-foot truck instead of a 40-foot trailer. In this case, I'm committed to more at a time. In this case, I've got a whole load of them. Ideally, if you've been reading a textbook and paying attention to me ranting, you would say, let's pay a little more for transportation and improve our manufacturing flexibility. And then let's see what we can do about these costs. That would be a really good management tool. Now, again, it's oversimplified, but fundamentally that's what people are doing all day long. Because if you get the principles in this, then no matter how sophisticated the formulation of the actual problem, fundamentally it comes down to what am I paying for, what am I risking? Because in this case, I have a lot of flexibility, I pay for that. In this case, I've accepted a lot of rigor, but it was cheaper. I think we are out of time. I will see you next time. Have a good day.